Hello everyone, it's the head from C3 Panel. It's been a while. We've had some production issues, so I've decided to do a series of interviews with illustrators and artists. And the first illustrator or artist that I'm going to be interviewing in this series is John Peter Meiring. John Peter is an illustrator and animator living in London, England, and he is the owner and operator of Odd Pumpkin, which he opened up after having a career in advertising design. He has a passion for creating children's books, illustrations, and animations, and he prefers illustrating digitally on his graphic tablets and is always trying to hide his pen from his crafty but adorable dog. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed by me today. So, I was just looking at a few of your projects. I thought it'd be nice to kind of talk about some of the stuff that you've put on your website. And kind of think one of my favorite things that I think I saw on there was the biscuit animation. So I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no problem at all. That is still one of my favorites
Yeah.
to debate as well. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But I for that animation, I was working for a studio in Birmingham, in the middle of England, and that was actually the first year that I moved to England back in 2000 and I think 16 or 17, and it was I won't mention the name of the company. I think they are quite huge, but they are a gambling corporation, and I was placed into the marketing department to create some social media fun, but try to lighten up the industry of gambling, I suppose. And I came up with the concepts basically for just to create some sort of thing. Actually, that animation didn't go live. The art director thought it was a bit too wacky, but I was allowed to keep it and show it off myself, really.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just like the kind of anarchic kind of sense of humor that kind of comes through it. So I really enjoyed that particular project, and kind of the reason why I wanted to interview today was kind of the second project that was on your website, which was a comic strip about two people trying to find a restaurant via their mobile phone. So I was just wondering if you could maybe talk about how that came about as well.
Oh right, yeah, that project is still actually ongoing,
Okay.
but I can't really pronounce their name. I'm very bad at these things, but my English is not my first language. But Hawaii, I think.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the mobile
Huawei.
phone and
Yeah, Huawei. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of controversy about how you're supposed to pronounce their name. So some people say Huawei, some people say Hua Hua. Oh, so yeah. Don't worry about that one too much.
I mean, yeah, it's quite confusing for myself as well. But yeah, I was commissioned by them to write and create some light humored situations using an art form of obviously wonderful comics, like kind of comic strip, and to try and highlight the features of the technology that they put out there. But for that particular project, I was just trying to just to try to make something funny out of it, really. But they enjoyed the art style, they enjoyed the script or the writing of it, and it went down pretty well. There's got a lot of good feedback on that one.
Yes, I mean that kind of flows nicely into my next question. Kind of, what are your art style influences? Kind of, where do you draw inspirations from the way that you choose to illustrate? Because it is quite, your kind of children's illustrations are kind of, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. They're kind of, they play around with the shape of the human form and monsters and
Mm.
that sort of thing, kind of, playing around with geometric shapes as well. So I was just wondering kind of how you came to find that, came to kind of develop that style.
I honestly, it took me a very long time on how to develop my own style. I have to be honest about that. I I suppose it's just because of the years going by that I was working in animation studios, and you had to really follow the guide of the particular show that I was working on. For instance, like Peppa Pig and the Adventures of Wander Over Yonder, you had to be able to copy the shape and style of that character or those characters. And then doing that over the years, I think I developed, or I leaned more towards a certain style of what I would like to do. And I think it came down to the fact that, well, just the plain fact that I like the geometric styles. I like over stretched proportions, and big eyes or no pupils and all sorts of things like that. But the problem is that the client picks the style, and you unfortunately sometimes have to follow that style, and you try and put your own flair in it, and your own 2 cents into it, and usually it works out and sometimes it doesn't, and you just have to start from scratch, really.
That's quite interesting. I don't think a lot of people realize when you're working on a brief or working with a client what a collaborative process it can be. So just what's kind of the scripting process like when you're taking on a project? Kind of what's your kind of like design process as well?
I would say the design process, I think the hardest part is actually getting information out of the clients and what they're thinking they want, but not exactly knowing what they want, because they usually come to you to put some imagery or some life into what exactly they're trying to bring across. So that is the honest hard part to get through one process. So it's a lot of emails back and forth. It's a lot of phone calls, Zoom calls to try and determine what exactly they're trying to say and how you can say it. But I think as soon as you get to after the scripts, and then after the script is approved, the easy part is then bringing characters and life with imagery or illustrations into what exactly needs to be said. That is the easiest part. I think the hardest part, like I said, is the admin conversations beforehand. But usually it's from approved scripts to rough sketches, and then after that is the easy part of just making everything look quite beautiful.
Okay, so do you have like much influence in the scripting of a project, or does it kind of very much depend on client to client?
It really from client to client. Some clients have a definite script, and then some clients is like, well, this is what I want, and I don't know how to say it, and I don't know how it wants it to look. So it depends to client, really.
So I suppose that kind of you need to do quite a lot of research before you go into a brief to kind of understand, not just the client's place within the market, but also,
Mm.
boring stuff about their brand identity and all that sort of like marketing wank as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Exactly that. That's exactly it. And they want their brand, which is usually quite mundane and straightforward. They want to bring some life into it, or they want you to do something creative with it, and that is the hard part. You have to research the entire brand identity, what they stand for, and how you can do something creative for them.
Yeah, I used to work in kind of social media
Mm.
marketing, and whenever we were trying to hire external, thankfully I was never involved in writing the briefs, but I'd read the briefs that my colleagues had written, and they were kind of quite tortuous documents to kind of like get through. And I was just thinking, I'm really glad I'm not on the other end of this, trying to figure out actually what a client wants. I think is can be quite
Oof.
quite a difficult thing. So you work on like a variety of different things. So you've done illustrations in children's books, your animation work, and as well as comic book strips. Do you have a preference as to which one of those formats you prefer to work in, or does it very much depend on the project itself?
I think in this day and age, it's quite hard. I've been struggling with this for years, because the main goal that I always wanted to strive for was to only stick with illustrations. I only wanted to do anything and everything with books and publishing books, so children's books to comic strips to comic books itself. But work like that doesn't come around very often. So you improvise on how you can stay afloat with the bills and the debts, and animation work brings in quite a lot of money, and combining illustration and animation brings you a lot, also again a lot more money than previously stated. So my preference would have always, and still today, is just to grab an iPad, sit on the beach, and draw a client's work for a book or a commission of a standalone illustration. Literally, just to stick with the illustration. That would be the dream.
Okay, so kind of one of my questions later on is kind of what does success look like for you, and so for success for you would look like just having a portfolio of clients that would want illustration work from you. Then I'm guessing.
I suppose I think what success would be for me would be having 3 book deals to finish books within a year.
Yeah.
That would be success. That would be, you would plan them to a T. You would get all the stages done and then carry on with the next book. Have a mini holiday in the middle of book 1 or 2, and then finish the 3rd book later in the year. And I think that would be it.
Okay, I mean that sounds like pretty sweet. In terms of like your working process, how long does it kind of take for you to kind of from initial inception to kind of like final version to the client? How long does that kind of like usually take for you to kind of like complete? Because I speak to a lot of artists, and it kind of varies. It varies a lot on kind of things like inspiration, passion, burnout, and all those sorts of things. So is it kind of a similar sort of thing for you as well?
And it again, it depends on who the client is and what they want. But let's take, for example, the book I'm doing now at the moment. It would be, going through their scripts, and then making storyboards, and after that making rough sketches of the characters. And the time frame, usually they would give you off a time frame or a deadline for the end product, and then I would either push back or accept, and I would set stages for each stage. I'd set time for each stage of the process. So usually, let's say for a book, 3 months is acceptable time. But
Yeah.
the problem is you either have projects in between, because either you can't afford only to have that project going on at the moment. So it's a lot of multitasking. It's a lot of dealing with a lot of projects, and splitting your time into 3 parts of the day. But it all depends on the budget and on time and things like that, really.
So I mean, I'm kind of quite interested in your background as well. You're born and raised in South Africa. Kind of some of the information you sent over to me about some of your favorite films and TV shows like Free Willy and Jurassic Park and
Mm.
Never Ending Story. So one question I always like to ask people when I'm talking about comics is kind of what is the first comic that you kind of remember reading?
I think my sister brought home a bunch of comics from her ex-boyfriend, who he was a bit of a dark soul. So he introduced me to Spawn when I was 10 to 11 years old. It is quite dark
Yeah.
for that age,
Yeah.
but I was fascinated. I was gripped. I absolutely loved the dark things, the dark humor and the dark stories. So that's why I also ventured into Batman quite young as well.
Yeah.
But my first comic, my first comic that I ever read was Ascension. And Ascension was a Top Cow comic book. It was part of the image version of Top Cow, and Ascension was one of them, alongside with Witchblade, The Darkness, and then Spawn as well. And I was neck deep in all of those comics. So I started collecting all of those, and then later on, I started easing up on the dark part of those stories, and I found a few great artists like Scotty Young, who is probably still to this day my favorite writer and illustrator. He is fantastic.
Okay, I'm always like curious when I speak to people from who grew up in different countries about kind of what comic books and graphic novels they
Mm,
kind of had access to, because yeah, each country's got its own like comic book traditions, I
mm,
think. So I was just wondering, are there any kind of like, South African comic books that you kind of read as a kid? I'm kind of specifically thinking, in the UK, we've got things like the Dandy and
mm.
the Beano and kind of Viz magazine as well. So were you exposed to kind of any of those things in South Africa in terms of not Dandy and the Beano, but were there any comic books like that out
I
there?
would say similar-ish
Yeah.
to that, but I think like the most famous thing that we were all exposed to was a comic strip that always went into the newspapers and magazines, was Madam and Eve, which it's based off, obviously Adam and Eve, and it was playing on the light or the very bad racism that went on in South Africa, but it was between a maid and a house owner, and they always had these weird arguments, and that's I saw the engagement of how to make comics with taking a very sore subject and just making a humor out of it. That was the one of the first ones. But there are back in the day there weren't a lot of options. There was, art was not a foreseeable career when I was growing up in South Africa. We grew up thinking that it was either sports or being a mechanic or something that always made money very fast. The art wasn't very much a considered part of a career, but this is what I was exposed to anyway. And then only later on, really, when the internet came along and Amazon and all of those things, that things started opening up, and I was exposed to a lot more things in that regard, because you could only really find some, the comic book stores were one and very far in between. You would find one comic book store within 100 kilometers of driving.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I thought things were bad in the UK, but that's
that's
yeah, it's a bit it's a bit of a longer distance to go.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And then obviously the cost of the comics as well, because they're coming from America, they're coming from the UK, they're coming from all over the place. So the cost, you can only buy one or two comics with your pocket money, really, like once every month or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, either it was a comic book every month or a PlayStation game. You had to choose.
Oh, it was that expensive.
It was
Oh
quite
wow.
expensive.
That kind of puts things in to perspective a little bit. If it's between like a video game and a couple of comics, that's
Mm.
that's really expensive.
Yeah, no, it was quite expensive, but eventually, then you just make a plan, and then that's when the whole what was it called, the not copywriting, but you would burn CDs with games, and you would just do it,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So eventually, when you know how to do that, then you can save money, really.
Yeah. Yeah. You can. Not that we would advocate any of
No,
our
no, no,
listeners
no.
doing that, of course not. So it's quite interesting that you were talking about your most memorable exposures being to comic books like Spawn and Ascension. And I was just you mentioned in your website, for some reason you can't stop drawing tentacles, monsters, and cute little critters. So I was just wondering if you think that's maybe had an influence on your art style, and maybe some of the anarchic sense of humor I've seen in some of your work as well.
Absolutely. I think it's growing up with my friends and my sisters who had a very dark sense of humor. I think
Yeah.
that it literally, and obviously the material I was just digesting from Spawn, Darkness, and all sorts of funny movies and all sorts of things, that it literally came through into my art, and that's why I love drawing something as scary or as a monster, but there's a bit of a humor to it because it's so friendly, or there's some sort of twist to it instead of having a plain Jane type of scenario.
Yeah, I think it's always good when you've got your own take on things, and I think especially for children, I think fear is quite an important emotion to explore, to kind of like test your boundaries and things of that nature.
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, outside of your commercial work that you're doing at the moment, are you working on any kind of like personal project, either illustrations or comic books or kind of animation, or is it at the moment are you just having to kind of feed the wallet with your commercial work?
Well, unfortunately, it's always feeding the wallet. Feeding the wallets. It's been since the beginning of the pandemic. It has not stopped. It's been very successful with client work and great projects that I've gotten so far. But there always has been a personal work that I've been doing myself. So I've been doing like kind of like a visual diary of something of my life, and I draw every page or every second page is a scenario that I thought of an experience that I've experienced that day, and I draw some sort of comic and make a comment about it. And I feel that if I could take all of those drawings and scripts that I've put together, I feel that I can make a book out of it, but to have some sort of story behind it. So that's been going on for quite a while, and I think hopefully that if the important clients work stops eventually, then I can start doing that passion project, really, because I would love to get that out.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Me and Cole have got slightly different interests in terms of the comic books we read. So he's very much into like monster stories and horror and things like this. Where I like nonfiction graphic novels. So I'm always interested in like biographies and
Mm.
things of that nature. So that and I think it's a really important way of exploring exploring the what the format can do in terms of comic books and graphic novels. I know you're probably not at the stage where you're prepared to kind of like talk about in huge details. But have you any idea how many pages this complete diary would be? Would it be a multimedia project where it's some comic strips with writing, or would it be kind of like a full graphic novel?
I think at this point in time, I have round about 60 to 65 pages filled with scribbles and rough drawings and everything like that. I think if I had to format it and put it in a nice digital format, I think it'll come up to like at
Yeah.
least 80 pages. And I started this daily drawing thing. I think it was 2012 when I was going through a very tough time, and I thought that this would help. It's a lot of people either write down in their diaries or whatever the case may be, but I thought that it could be like a therapeutic type of therapy to it. But I think it will come up to be a graphic novel, but it in certain sections.
Yeah.
So subdivided into the time of this period to the time that I was very happy or the time I was very sad or whatever the case may be. That's the part I still need to figure out, and that's literally the hard work, but the fun part too.
Yeah, I think it's always when you start off on a project, because I write a little bit myself, kind of
Nice.
figuring out what the scope of it is going to be is
Mm,
like one of the hardest things. And yeah, I'm quite often on places like Reddit and things like this, and you've got these excitable young script writers that say, "I've got
mm,
this 100 page like graphic novel," and I'm just thinking, well, you really need to kind of start off small and maybe try and write a 4 page, a 4 panel funny, and then kind of build it up for this. I think
yeah.
what you're doing in terms of doing the daily practice, I think is definitely going to be helpful in terms of both the discipline and kind of understanding what the scope of what you're trying to create is as well.
That's yeah, it's exactly that. It's like know your limits.
Yeah,
Know creating so much material is great, but you need to like always my art teacher said, keep it simple, stupid, and simple.
Yeah, yeah. That, but it's
They're literally simple cells. Simple and overcomplicated and overabundance of material does not. It just confuses people, and it even confuses you more. So, absolutely, definitely agree with
and I
that.
think that something comes across in your art style as well. Actually, is that there is a clarity of vision in a lot of the stuff that that I've seen that in your portfolio. At least there's a kind of a clarity to the image and the storytelling. That's it. Kind of makes it easy to understand what you're trying to do without overburdening it with lots of complicated lines or colorings and things of that nature.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly. Every stroke is a thought of what to do next.
Is this something that you'd want to do yourself, or would you be kind of open up for collaborating with other people on it, or is it kind of very much something that you'd want to shape yourself?
I think actually no. I would love to actually collaborate with other people on this one because I love what I essentially want to do is to have. Obviously, the majority of the illustrations will be mine, but I would love to have other artists to develop, read what I've written and then develop what they envision. I love seeing that from somebody else's perspective. So I think having different artists or even script writers to read what I've written and then create something additional to it to carry on, stretch it out as far as I can and see if it works. I would love to do this with other people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's always kind of like exciting, a little bit frightening when you kind of bring other people on board a project.
Mm,
I mean, if you're looking for people to collaborate, a shout out to friends of the podcast, Work in Progress London. They're a fantastic community of people that create comic books. So if you're looking for someone to work with, or just if you're working on the project and you need someone to have a look at the progress that you're making, I can't recommend they they meet once a month on Saturdays, and they're doing most of their sessions virtually. So I'll send you a link to their to those guys
yeah.
as well. But yeah, if there are any comic book people out there that may be struggling or whatever, Work in Progress are there's such a lovely bunch of guys. And Joe, who has previously appeared on the podcast, he's managed to help maintain this community. To shout out to Joe as well. I think they're doing the Hackney zine at some point. Yeah, shout out to those guys. So you mentioned you prefer to work digitally when you're kind of animate what when you're working with illustrations or comics. Why do you prefer kind of that method as opposed to more traditional techniques with paper and ink?
I think, I mean, I absolutely still to this day love working traditional, but I think obviously every single time I intend to do it traditionally, there is a deadline, there's a time constraint, and working digitally is just literally faster in terms of that. That's mainly most of the reason, and I honestly thoroughly enjoy digital, but there's just something again like with working traditionally is it's therapeutic. It's you stick on some music and it's Friday night and you just drawing and inking away. It's great. I love it, but that's I think with traditional it just suits personal projects
Yes,
more.
yeah, I can kind of understand that. It
Yeah, I mean, mainly what I do is if I have nothing to do over the weekend, I literally take an old skateboard, I sand it down, and I draw on it, and I create a clock out of it or
Oh,
something.
that's really cool. That's really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was thinking of doing this to sell or whatnot, but again I don't have the
yeah.
time. There's so many ideas to do, but I don't have the time for it. I really wish I could, but yeah.
Yeah, kind of what software and tools are you using to work digitally? I'm always interested in what people. Sorry, I'm always interested in what
Hmm.
kit people are using to create.
I for years I swore on obviously Wacom tablet with Photoshop. It's still one of the best tools today, but I honestly I can't stop working on my iPad with the Procreate. It's fantastic.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think you're the first person that I've interviewed that actually uses the iPad in that way with Procreate. Was it a big leap to go from using the Wacom to the iPad, or was it kind of pretty? Was it a smooth transition?
I think for me it was a smooth transition. I think it was if you excited to be on the iPad, it makes it a lot
Yeah,
better. The transition is a lot easier. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do love my 32-inch Wacom, and it's smooth and it's big and it's comfortable. But there's just something so cool. With just literally, we're sitting on the couch, lying down, the pooch is
yeah,
on your lap, and you can still watch movies and draw on the iPad. And it's smooth, it's fast, it doesn't crash. You can use your fingers to color in things quickly instead of creating paths on Photoshop. I don't know. There's something unique about it. I mean, sometimes obviously I do take the work that I do on the on Procreate, and I bring it into Photoshop to do some tonal and contrast and brightness.
yeah.
All the things that the iPad can't do. But honestly, there's now they have Photoshop on the iPad, and you can do all of that already. It's literally a mini laptop, and it's fantastic. I love
That's
it.
that's that's really. I actually I do find that fascinating because the way you kind of described your process there is kind of like you're almost working on a notebook and sketching in the part
Mm.
in your lap rather than having this weird cybergenetic like setup where you've got like a tablet there and you're looking at a screen and you're not really looking at what you're drawing because you're looking at the screen.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think also the one thing that people don't realize, especially when if you have a Surface Pro or iPad or notebook, if you the change in attitude or the change in workflow when you're away from your big cybernetic network on your by your table, if you draw somewhere else, I'm sitting under a tree or somewhere at a coffee shop in London, the workflow either makes it either better or I draw better or I draw worse. It all depends on your mood, your feeling, and the idea you have at that point in time. And drawing with the iPad in a coffee shop and you're drawing people around you or some sort of idea you see on the side of a truck or a bus, it you don't get those moments sitting in front of your computer all the time.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's
mm,
you're the first person that kind of mentioned that kind of mentioned kind of how different where you draw really does affect how you draw. So I think that's a fascinating point that you've kind of raised, and I think that's definitely a question I'm going to be asking um
mm,
in the future.
yeah, it's a big can of
Yeah,
worms to open that
I think
topic.
I think it really is though because where I think especially given the part what's happened the past 18 months, almost 2
Mm,
years with like the pandemic, a lot of people have been locked indoors, and I think that has affected the creative output for a lot of people. I, I, I think we've all kind of realised how important it is for human beings to be kind of out and about and bumping into each
mm,
other and having these weird interactions or awkward moments with other people and listening to birdsong or going on a train and all these things. It all
mm.
filters into your head and kind of comes out later on if you're a creative person. So yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah, it's you don't get creativity from literally sitting behind your desk. You situations in life is out there, so just going around for a walk and listening to birds singing or the screeching of a bad car brake or anything. It creates ideas. It stimulates your brain. So I realized this in the first and second lockdown, and I was like, well, I'm just going to go sit in a forest with the iPad and let my dog run around going crazy, chasing squirrels while I work under a tree. And it worked. It literally did me wonders in terms of the mental state.
I think that's great that you found that methodology. Get your work done and keep your mental health where it kind of needed to be as
Yeah.
well.
Sure.
One of the things I like to ask people is what have they been reading lately. So it doesn't need to be necessarily graphic novels or comic books, but recommendations in those formats would be greatly appreciated. Have you been reading any interesting or books or listening to any interesting podcasts?
So I always listen to podcasts when I work. It's either rewatching some sort of TV series that I
Yeah,
love,
yeah.
background noise, or listening to podcasts. And lately, the podcast that I've been listening to, I've just found one called King Falls AM, and I love story bound podcasts. It's a full blown story, and it goes on for thousands of episodes, and it's fantastic. I love that. King Falls
What's that
AM.
about?
So it's basically said like when a famous radio presenter goes to a small town in somewhere in the middle of America. It's literally hardly any technology or anything. That's just all about fishing and pancakes and all sorts of things like that. And the every episode there's some sort of horrific ghost that comes up, or a werewolf, or this town is literally haunted. And every episode something bad or something new comes along. But how they twist the humor with the scary part, and there's a main plot, and there's the you fall in love with the characters because they are so funny. They're so funny, and then they obviously have like weird radio adverts that they make. The producers make themselves, and the voice acting is so funny and so good. I thoroughly enjoy listening to that podcast.
And you're before I cut across, you're about to mention another podcast or a book, I think.
So the book I'm reading now at the moment, I'm on series, I think it's book actually 3 now, and it's called Monstrous. Um, it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a book that we've reviewed on the podcast. Both myself and Cole love it. The
Mm,
artwork is just unbelievably.
it's
It
something
is
else.
unbelievably gorgeous. I mean, the world design, the coloring, the inking, the way they the line work is just sublime.
Every time I read it or go like a double page spread, I get goosebumps. Like, I honestly hope and wish that they would make a movie about this, because oh my gosh, these characters, the tiger pirates,
Oh
and
yeah. That's a fantastic
it's
sequence. Yeah,
unbelievable. And the cats with like 6 tails and everything. It's so I can't recommend it
it is
enough,
a
really.
gorgeous comic book. It's got superb writing. The characters and the dialogue are fantastic as well. Go listen to our review of that if you're not convinced. It is
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic. It's a good shout. It's a very good choice that you've made there. One of my favorite things about Monstrous is like the detail they put into the fabrics of the clothes that people are
Oh,
wearing. And I'm just thinking, how long must that have taken you to do? It's just kind of unreal.
it's just, the guns, the armor, the it's yeah. She is a goddess. This illustrator is a goddess. I'm sorry, like, it's crazy. And even Neil Gaiman said, remarkable and beautifully made book. Like, it's crazy. So
Yeah. So I think, have I got any more questions for you? Oh yes. What projects are you working on next? Is there anything that we should be keeping an eye on?
So there is actually quite a very, very cool book. A children's book I'm working on at the moment. It's based. I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to
Yeah.
talk about it, but it's based off Mickey, the chimpanzee, who was based in Liverpool in the 19. I think it was 1953 or 1946. I'm not quite sure in the year. I need to actually double check on that. But yeah, Mickey the chimpanzee, who escaped the Liverpool Zoo 16 times.
Oh, okay. A bit of an escape artist.
Yeah. So this author bought the rights to write a story about this chimpanzee, and he's created a wonderful world of literally of the entire scenario of Mickey the chimpanzee. So I'm working on now that at the moment. That should be out hopefully end of September, if everything goes well. But other than that, there's obviously just, there's educational books that I've been doing at the moment. And it's just all now social media animations, really, that's keeping me afloat and keeping me busy.
That sounds good. So, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
Let's see. I think actually you've asked me everything. But, we've covered equipment, we've covered inspiration, and current inspiration. I think everything has literally been talked about, really.
Okay, that's great. John, could you please let people know where they can find you on the internet, social media, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, of course. So my website is currently at oddpumpkinstudio.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's Odd Pumpkin Studio, lower dash studio, UK, and you'll find me all the information on there, basically.
Okay, so it just leaves me to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak to me, John. It's been a really pleasant and insightful conversation.
No problem. Yeah, thank you.
And guys, for the rest of our listeners, season 2 of Audio Bookish, my other podcast, is well underway. We've got potentially some exciting author interviews coming up, so please keep your ears open for that. We just finished reviewing True Crime Story by Jovis Knox, which I think might be my audiobook of the year. I've got 2-3 more of these interviews planned, so yeah, just keep your eyes on your feeds. Thank you, John.
Oh, no problem. Thanks very much.
Okay, guys, bye.
Bye-bye.